Rainbow Gathering. The Rainbow Gathering is a series of annual, decentralized events convened by the Rainbow Family of Living Light, a countercultural collective that eschews formal leadership and hierarchy in favor of consensus-based decision-making and voluntary mutual aid to promote ideals of peace, nonviolence, and communal harmony. Subsequent paragraphs would detail the logistical evolution, including seed camps for site preparation and regional variants worldwide, but the national U.S. event remains the flagship, embodying a neo-nomadic experiment in anarchic self-organization. Defining characteristics include the Shanti Sena Peacekeeping Network, which addresses conflicts through mediation rather than authority, and diverse subcamps reflecting spiritual pluralism from shamanism to Rastafarianism. Origins and core principles. Founding and early vision. The Rainbow Family of Living Light, the loose collective organizing the gatherings, originated in 1970 when Garrick Beck and Barry Plunker Adams established it through networks of West Coast countercultural groups, drawing from post-1960s hippie communes and anti-establishment activism. The first Rainbow Gathering materialized in July 1972 at Strawberry Lake in the Colorado Rockies, near Granby, where participants hiked into remote public lands to form a self-sustaining encampment described by organizers as a gathering of the tribes from disparate communes nationwide. Core to the early vision was a rejection of consumerism and coercion, with participants committing to nonviolence, environmental stewardship on National Forest Service lands, and rituals invoking unity across spiritual traditions, including Native American-inspired prophecies of intertribal harmony, that some attendees cited as prophetic validation. This blueprint emphasized perpetual renewal via annual rotations to new sites, sustaining the movement's nomadic ethos while testing the limits of scalability without centralized authority. Stated ideals of non-commercialism, consensus, and spirituality. The Rainbow Family of Living Light articulates non-commercialism, consensus decision-making, and spirituality as foundational ideals intended to create a participatory, egalitarian temporary society during gatherings. These principles, rooted in countercultural rejection of mainstream institutions, prioritize voluntary cooperation, resource sharing, and collective spiritual practice over hierarchy, profit, or dogma. Since the inaugural 1972 gathering in Colorado's Roosevelt National Forest, participants have invoked these ideals to construct self-sustaining camps emphasizing peace and environmental harmony. Non-commercialism manifests as a strict prohibition on monetary transactions within the gathering site, with essentials like food, water, and medical supplies distributed freely via a gift economy sustained by voluntary labor and donations collected in a magic hat during main councils. Barter is permitted only for non-essentials in informal trading circles, but all core activities remain unmonetized to cultivate interdependence and critique consumer capitalism. This principle, consistently upheld across annual events drawing up to 20,000 attendees, aligns with the group's nomadic ethos of escaping economic coercion. Consensus decision-making rejects voting or appointed leaders, instead relying on open councils where any participant may speak, often using a talking stick to regulate turns, until proposals achieve broad agreement through discussion and modification. Regional and national site selections, for instance, emerge from such processes in vision councils, allowing dissenters to stand aside but requiring active blocking only for fundamental objections. This anarchic model, drawn from indigenous and Quaker influences, aims to prevent power imbalances while accommodating diverse views, though it can extend deliberations over days. Spirituality centers on eclectic, non-sectarian practices fostering personal and collective healing, with gatherings framed as experiments in spiritual vibration to manifest global peace. Elements include daily Om circles for meditation and chanting, vision quests, sweat lodges, and interfaith prayer sessions invoking nature as sacred, without adherence to any single doctrine. The group's self-designation as the Family of Living Light underscores beliefs in universal light energy and human interconnectedness, promoting tolerance across beliefs while prioritizing anti-violence and ecological reverence over institutional religion. Historical evolution. Initial gatherings in the 1970s. The inaugural Rainbow Gathering, originally conceived as the World Family Gathering to symbolize unity across diverse groups, convened from July 1 to 7, 1972, on public land in the Roosevelt National Forest near Granby, Colorado. Annual events followed, solidifying traditions of consensus-based councils and temporary utopian communities on national forest lands. The 1973 gathering occurred in Wyoming's Shoshone National Forest near Pass Creek, attracting an estimated 30,000 participants focused on similar ideals of nonviolence and environmental harmony. Growth and regionalization in the 1980s-1990s. Following the initial gatherings of the 1970s, The Rainbow family's annual U.S. events persisted into the 1980s and 1990s, relocating each year to varied national forest sites to mitigate environmental strain on any single location and facilitate attendance from diverse geographic areas. The 1980 gathering occurred in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest at the Three Forks of the Williams River. These rotations exemplified an early form of regional adaptation within the continental U.S., though formal regional councils and smaller interim gatherings gained traction later in the period. Parallel to the annual national assemblies, the Rainbow movement underwent regionalization through the proliferation of localized events across the United States, enabling more frequent, smaller-scale meetings that reduce logistical burdens associated with cross-country travel. For example, the Ocala Regional Gathering in Florida hosted community kitchens like Everybody's Kitchen starting in 1992, which then appeared at subsequent annuals. This development fostered decentralized organization, aligning with the group's consensus-based ethos by empowering subgroups to handle site selection and operations independently while maintaining connection to the broader network. Internationally, the 1980s marked the onset of autonomous yet interconnected gatherings outside North America, signifying global regionalization. Gatherings began forming in Europe during this decade, with events such as the 1990 Assembly in Allensteig, Austria. Modern-era challenges and events, 2000s-2025. In the 2000s, Rainbow gatherings faced escalating legal confrontations with the U.S. Forest Service over permit requirements for large assemblies on public lands. The Rainbow family maintained that obtaining permits contradicted their non-hierarchical principles and invoked First Amendment rights to free assembly, leading to repeated prosecutions and lawsuits. For instance, the 2000 National Gathering in Beaverhead National Forest, Montana, drew approximately 22,000 participants without a permit, resulting in federal charges against organizers for failing to submit operating plans. The 2005 Annual Gathering in Monongahela National Forest, West Virginia, exemplified tensions with authorities, with an expected attendance of around 8,000 participants monitored by U.S. Marshals and state police. Attendees faced fines of $30 for minor infractions after pleading no contest, amid disputes with the Forest Service over access and operations. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, such conflicts persisted through court challenges, including cases like United States v. Kolb, which addressed Forest Service enforcement against Rainbow participants. The COVID-19 pandemic introduced health-related challenges, prompting adaptations such as regional PRISM gatherings in 2021 instead of a single national event, with reduced attendance due to restrictions and concerns, typically around 10,000 for nationals but smaller for regionals like in New Mexico. A significant modern escalation occurred in 2024 when the U.S. Forest Service ordered the evacuation of approximately 500 Rainbow family members from Plumas National Forest, California, citing wildfire risks during a red flag warning, public safety threats, and the event's unauthorized status. The incident underscored growing regulatory pressures from environmental hazards and logistical burdens on federal lands. Attendance at national gatherings has shown variability, with reports of declines from peaks near 20,000 in early 2000s events to lower figures in recent years, attributed to aging demographics, logistical difficulties, and external restrictions. Operational practices. Site selection and logistics. The site for the annual National Rainbow Gathering is determined through a consensus process at the Vision Council, convened on July 7, the concluding day of the prior year's event. For instance, the 1991 Vision Council selected Colorado generally, with scouts confirming Overland Reservoir near Paonia as the 1992 site on June 9, encompassing about 2,500 acres at 10,000 feet elevation, including a 20-acre area for the Central Prayer Circle. Logistics emphasize minimal infrastructure and participant self-reliance, with locations announced via word of mouth, flyers, and online forums to nearby towns, from which attendees carpool, hitchhike, or drive on designated forest roads to peripheral parking zones. Camps, kitchens, and sanitation systems. Participants at Rainbow gatherings establish decentralized camping areas using tents, teepees and tarps constructed from scavenged or natural materials, often clustered by affinity groups or themes such as Kid Village for families with children, a camp for alcohol-tolerant attendees on the periphery, and specialized camps like Jesus Camp or Tea Time. Kitchens form the communal core, with dozens of volunteer-operated setups providing free, often vegetarian meals sourced from donations and served in large vats to the Main Meadows dinner circle twice daily around 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Sanitation systems emphasize low-impact methods, including slit trench latrines, shitters, dug daily and treated with lime or ash, positioned at least 50 feet from water sources and kitchens to reduce disease transmission. Internal enforcement mechanisms, Shanti Sena and CALM. Shanti Sena, derived from the Sanskrit terms for peace army, functions as the volunteer-based peacekeeping network at rainbow gatherings, emphasizing non-violent mediation over coercive enforcement. In operational terms, Shanti Sena patrols informally, addresses immediate threats like aggressive behavior or theft by surrounding individuals in protective circles to contain risks, and coordinates evacuations or interventions during emergencies such as fires or assaults. CALM, Center for Alternative Living Medicine, operates as the primary medical and healing collective, providing holistic first aid, emotional support, and alternative therapies to sustain participant well-being amid the gathering's rugged, off-grid conditions. While not explicitly an enforcement body, CALM contributes to internal stability by mitigating health disruptions that could escalate into broader disorder, such as untreated infections from poor sanitation or emotional breakdowns amid interpersonal tensions. Social dynamics, community interactions and consensus decision-making. The Rainbow family employs consensus decision-making as the core mechanism for group choices, eschewing majority voting to ensure all voices are considered and agreement is reached without coercion. Councils convene daily, typically from noon until dinner in the main meadow, addressing operational matters like resource allocation and conflict resolution. Community interactions emphasize non-hierarchical egalitarianism, with focalizers facilitating proceedings without authority, ensuring procedural adherence rather than directing outcomes. Expressions of creativity, spirituality, and non-membership. Rainbow gatherings feature diverse spiritual expressions drawn from eclectic sources, emphasizing peace, love, and unity without adherence to any single doctrine. Participants engage in practices such as meditation, drum circles, and communal chanting, often in natural settings to foster a sense of interconnectedness with the environment and others. Creative expressions at the gatherings manifest spontaneously through music, dance, poetry, and visual arts, contributing to a vibrant, participatory atmosphere. Attendees often participate in fire juggling, acro-yoga, laughing meditation, and sculpture, with music and singing serving as central communal bonds. The principle of non-membership underscores the gathering structure as a leaderless, anarchic assembly open to all without formal affiliation or dues. Described as the largest non-organization of non-members, it lacks official leaders, spokespersons, or membership criteria, relying instead on voluntary participation and consensus for decision-making. Environmental impacts. Resource consumption and waste generation. Rainbow gatherings emphasize principles of minimal environmental impact, with participants encouraged to pack in their own supplies, use communal kitchens for shared food preparation, and adhere to a pack-it-in, pack-it-out ethos for waste. However, the scale of attendance, often 10,000 to 20,000 individuals over several weeks, results in substantial resource demands that frequently exceed self-imposed limits. Food consumption relies on donated and foraged items distributed through volunteer-run kitchens, but external sourcing via vehicles contributes to fuel use, with no comprehensive quantified data on aggregate caloric intake or sourcing efficiency available from independent audits. Water resource consumption poses acute challenges due to the off-grid setting, where attendees filter stream or spring water using portable pumps and gravity systems, theoretically conserving usage through rationing. In practice, large gatherings have led to unauthorized diversions from natural sources. For instance, during the 1998 event in Arizona's Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, participants illegally siphoned hundreds of thousands of gallons from forest streams and pipes, straining local hydrology and introducing contaminants from upstream activities. Such diversions, combined with sanitation runoff, degrade water quality, as evidenced by elevated nitrogen levels in soil and surface water post-event from fecal matter decomposition, which averages 15% nitrogen by dry mass. Waste generation is dominated by human and animal excreta, with solid trash secondary but persistent. An analysis of a 2021 New Mexico gathering with approximately 10,000 attendees estimated 23 tons of human feces and 1.8 tons of dog feces left behind, equivalent to roughly 4.6 pounds per person over the event duration, far surpassing managed latrine capacities and leading to open defecation in forested areas. Solid waste includes plastics, cans, and abandoned gear, with post-gathering cleanup crews reporting removal of tons of debris, such as over several tons in a 2019 Georgia event, but independent observations frequently document residual litter, including cigarette butts and utensils, due to incomplete participant compliance. These impacts arise causally from high-density, temporary occupation without modern infrastructure, amplifying per capita waste relative to dispersed populations. For example, unmanaged latrines and fire pits contribute to soil compaction and nutrient overload, persisting beyond cleanup phases. While organizers deploy Shanti Sena for enforcement and post-event restoration, federal agencies like the U.S. Forest Service note recurring violations, including 116 citations for resource damage in a 2023 New Hampshire gathering, underscoring gaps between ideals and execution. Long-term ecological damage and cleanup efforts. Rainbow gatherings, involving thousands of participants in remote national forest areas, have been associated with short-term ecological disturbances such as soil compaction from foot traffic and vehicle use, vegetation trampling, and erosion along roads and trails. Cleanup efforts typically involve dedicated post-gathering volunteer crews from the Rainbow family, who remove trash, bury human waste latrines, aerate compacted soils, reseed disturbed areas with native species, and dismantle temporary structures. Post-event evaluations by the U.S. Forest Service have generally concluded minimal long-term ecological damage after rehabilitation, with vegetation largely recovering naturally or through reseeding. Government and legal interactions. Financial burdens on public resources. The U.S. Forest Service allocates approximately $400,000 to $500,000 annually from federal funds to manage rainbow gatherings, covering law enforcement, resource monitoring, and administrative expenses, as these events occur on public lands without participant fees or permits requiring cost recovery. Local governments face additional unreimbursed costs for emergency services, including medical responses, search and rescue operations, and traffic management. In Montana's 2013 gathering, Beaverhead County reported expenses exceeding $250,000, prompting state-level interventions. Cleanup and site restoration add variable costs, often estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per event, despite organizers leave no trace principles, due to dispersed waste, trail damage, and vegetation impacts requiring federal or local remediation. Conflicts with law enforcement and regulatory compliance. Rainbow gatherings have frequently resulted in conflicts with law enforcement due to the group's refusal to obtain special use permits required by the U.S. Forest Service for non-commercial gatherings exceeding 75 participants on National Forest System lands. In response to non-compliance, the Forest Service has issued closure orders and deployed law enforcement, leading to citations, arrests, and evacuations. For instance, during the 2024 gathering in Plumas National Forest, California, officials ordered over 500 attendees to leave on June 28 after no permit was obtained, citing violations of federal regulations and potential disruptions. Regulatory non-compliance extends to sanitation and waste management, often resulting in citations for improper human waste disposal and environmental degradation that contravenes Forest Service guidelines. Tensions have escalated into direct confrontations, including participant interference with police operations, as seen in the 1987 North Carolina gathering where multiple arrests stemmed from blocking law enforcement access. Major controversies. Drug use, alcohol, and public safety risks. The Rainbow family of Living Light officially discourages the open consumption of alcohol and prohibits illegal drugs at its gatherings, aiming to foster a substance-free environment suitable for families and spiritual reflection. This policy stems from the gathering's foundational principles established in 1972, partly by participants seeking recovery from addiction, including military veterans. However, enforcement relies on voluntary consensus rather than formal authority, leading to inconsistent adherence. Empirical reports from U.S. Forest Service law enforcement document frequent violations involving controlled substances. During the 2023 national gathering in New Hampshire's White Mountain National Forest, approximately 120 citations were issued, with nearly half related to illegal drug possession. Similar patterns emerged in prior events, such as 91 enforcement actions in Colorado's 2022 gathering, including drug-related offenses, and over 100 violations in other sites encompassing narcotics alongside motor vehicle infractions and resisting arrest. Authorities note that excessive alcohol use and drug activity contribute to public health concerns, including potential medical emergencies from overdoses or impaired behavior. These infractions heighten public safety risks, as evidenced by isolated violent incidents linked to substance use, such as a 2014 stabbing arrest at a Utah gathering attributed to an intoxicated altercation. Local law enforcement often deploys heightened patrols to mitigate threats like impaired driving, unattended fires amid intoxication, and disruptions to sanitation or traffic that endanger both attendees and nearby communities. Despite claims from some participants of selective enforcement, Forest Service data underscores a pattern of non-compliance that strains emergency resources and elevates hazards in remote forest settings. Cultural appropriation and relations with indigenous groups. Criticisms of cultural appropriation in rainbow gatherings center on the adoption of indigenous spiritual practices, such as council circles, sweat lodges, and vision quests, often without authentic transmission from native practitioners or regard for their sacred contexts. Participants, drawing from a countercultural ethos influenced by 1960s hippie movements, frequently incorporate elements perceived as faux Native American rituals, including drum circles and feather headdresses, which indigenous critics argue mock and commodify traditions tied to specific tribal protocols and histories of colonization. A prominent controversy arose during the 2015 National Rainbow Gathering in South Dakota's Black Hills, He-Sapa, a site sacred to the Lakota as the heart of their creation stories and location of 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre remnants. An open letter from over 100 indigenous signatories, published in Indian Country Today, accused the event of desecrating the area through unauthorized ceremonies that appropriated Lakota rituals, including improper use of sacred pipes and songs, while leaving environmental damage like trampled sites and litter. Similar conflicts recurred in the 2024 proposed gathering in California's Plumas National Forest, on ancestral Maidu lands scarred by recent wildfires. Susanville Indian Rancheria Vice Chairman Robert Joseph issued a statement opposing the event, citing risks to culturally significant sites and ridicule of tribal elders' requests to avoid the area, with gatherers accused of ignoring damage to oak groves and waterways vital for acorn harvesting and ceremonies. Relations with indigenous groups remain strained, though sporadic outreach exists. The Tribal Outreach Project, initiated around 2024, seeks to inform tribes about gatherings on their ancestral territories, sharing protocols for minimizing harm, but critics view it as reactive damage control rather than proactive respect. Recorded incidents of deaths and injuries. At the 2014 National Rainbow Gathering in Utah's Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest near Heber City, 68-year-old Timothy R. Gillespie from Cushing, Texas, was found dead inside his tent on June 28, with authorities ruling out foul play and suspecting natural causes. During a 2015 regional gathering in Florida's Apalachicola National Forest, a shooting on March 5 left one attendee, Jacob Cardwell from Arizona, dead from multiple gunshot wounds, while two others sustained critical injuries from gunfire, including one who was left paralyzed. The 2017 National Gathering in Oregon's Malheur National Forest recorded two deaths: George Ernest Rogers III, 43, from Dumas, Texas, who collapsed over the weekend prior to July 4, and William Pascoe, 74, from Tacoma Park, Maryland, who died on July 4. Both cases appeared to involve natural causes, with no further details released by authorities. Earlier incidents linked to travel for gatherings include the 1980 murders of Vicky Durian, 26, and Nancy Santamero, 19, who were shot at close range while hitchhiking to the West Virginia National event on June 25. Their bodies were discovered 5 days later in a remote forest clearing, in a case long known as the Rainbow Murders, but remaining unsolved despite convictions later overturned. Global extensions. European and international gatherings. The first European Rainbow Gathering took place in 1983 in Val Campo, Ticino, Switzerland, marking the initial adaptation of the North American model to the continent, with participants emphasizing non-monetary communal living and consensus-based organization. The 25th European Gathering in 2007 convened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, drawing participants amid post-conflict regional dynamics while adhering to principles of non-violence and site cleanup. Beyond Europe, international rainbow gatherings have proliferated regionally and through periodic world events, extending the decentralized network to Asia, Oceania, Africa, and the Middle East. The first non-European gathering outside North America occurred in Israel in 1992, initiated by American participants and evolving into recurring regional assemblies. World Rainbow Gatherings, intended as global convergences, include the 2023 event in Nepal, which featured multicultural prayer circles and communal kitchens amid Himalayan settings, emphasizing planetary healing themes. These international variants maintain core tenets like no formal leadership or fees but adapt to local ecologies and regulations, with attendance varying from hundreds to thousands based on accessibility and promotion via informal networks. 105. Rainbow Family. The Rainbow Family of Living Light is a decentralized, anarchic countercultural network that emerged in the early 1970s from the remnants of the 1960s hippie and anti-war movements, defined by its rejection of formal leadership, money, and hierarchy in favor of consensus-driven communal living and non-commercial gatherings focused on peace, environmental restoration, and mutual aid. The group's inaugural event, A Gathering of the Tribes, occurred in 1972 in Colorado's Roosevelt National Forest, initiating an annual tradition of multi-week assemblies in remote U.S. national forests that draw 10,000 to 30,000 participants to form temporary, self-sustaining villages with shared vegetarian kitchens, healing circles, and volunteer peacekeeping via the Shanti Sina system. These gatherings emphasize prefigurative politics, living out ideals of nonviolence and ecological harmony, through practices like open councils for unanimous decision-making and free resource distribution, though empirical observations reveal communal sharing of substances such as marijuana alongside efforts to enforce alcohol-free zones. Notable for its longevity and resistance to institutionalization, the Rainbow family has sustained a global presence with regional events, yet it faces persistent controversies, including U.S. Forest Service enforcement actions over unpermitted land use interpreted as First Amendment expressions, documented sanitation failures contributing to infectious disease outbreaks like shigellosis affecting over half of attendees in 1987, and criticisms of internal social control inconsistencies, cultural appropriation from indigenous traditions, and underrepresentation of minorities. Origins and early development. Founding events, 1970s. The Rainbow family of living light originated as a decentralized countercultural network in the early 1970s, forming in response to the dissolution of 1960s hippie communes and peace movements amid events like the Kent State shootings and ongoing Vietnam War protests. Its foundational event was the first National Rainbow Gathering, held from July 1, 1972, near Strawberry Lake in Colorado's Arapahoe National Forest, west of Granby. Organized by a loose collective known as the Rainbow Family from Eugene, Oregon, the week-long assembly drew participants seeking to unite disparate tribes of communes through non-commercial meditation, prayer, and communal living as an alternative to societal violence and hierarchy. Individuals such as Garrick Beck, who acted as a focalizer in coordinating logistics, and Barry Plunker, who influenced the Shanti Sina nonviolent peacekeeping ethos, played pivotal roles in conceptualizing the event, drawing from prophetic visions and prior festivals like Woodstock to envision a space for diverse subcultures to converge without leaders or dues. Attendance began with approximately 7,000 on the first day, with thousands more arriving via hikes of up to 16 miles carrying provisions. Total estimates reached 10,000 to 20,000 over the duration, reflecting organic mobilization through underground networks rather than formal promotion. Participants established ad hoc structures including consensus-based councils for decision-making, volunteer-staffed free kitchens distributing shared food, and basic sanitation via slit trenches, while 4 physicians and National Guard helicopters provided medical aid despite local opposition over environmental and traffic concerns. The gathering emphasized minimal impact on public lands and a ban on drug sales, though personal use occurred, setting precedents for annual rotations on national forest sites and reinforcing the group's anarchic, earth-connected identity. Influences from counterculture movements. The Rainbow family drew heavily from the hippie movement of the 1960s, adopting ideals of communal living, rejection of materialism, and emphasis on personal freedom and nonviolence. A key impetus was the anti-war activism of the Vietnam era, with the first Rainbow Gathering in 1972 at Strawberry Lake, Colorado, organized partly as a unifying response to the perceived fragmentation of the 1960s peace movement. Environmentalism also shaped the movement, aligning with the emerging ecological awareness of the late 1960s, such as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, 1962, and the First Earth Day, 1970. By emphasizing leave no trace camping in harmony with nature during gatherings on public lands. Ideology and organizational principles. Core beliefs and goals. The Rainbow family of living light adheres to a set of principles rooted in nonviolence, egalitarianism, and rejection of hierarchical authority. Participants view all individuals as inherently equal, with no one above or below another, emphasizing self-responsibility and voluntary cooperation over imposed rules or leadership. This structure draws from an anarchist ethos of mutual aid, where resources, food, and labor are shared freely, prohibiting monetary transactions to prioritize communal solidarity. 1. Core goals center on manifesting peace and harmony as alternatives to mainstream societal norms. Gatherings, initiated in 1972, explicitly aim to express our sincere desire that there shall be peace on earth, harmony among all people, inviting participation from diverse races and backgrounds to model non-coercive social organization. Environmental stewardship and ecological harmony form integral beliefs, with gatherings designed to leave sites improved, through activities like tree planting and waste minimization, while promoting sustainable lifestyles such as whole food sharing and respect for nature as a cathedral. Decision-making and non-hierarchical structure. The Rainbow family operates without formal leaders or centralized authority, relying on consensus-based processes to embody its commitment to anarchistic, egalitarian principles. Decisions emerge from open council meetings accessible to any participant, where proposals are discussed iteratively until broad agreement is reached, eschewing majority voting or hierarchical directives. Council structures include specialized variants such as vision councils for selecting annual gathering sites and banking councils for allocating resources like donations from the Magic Hat collection. Despite the absence of official hierarchy, ethnographic analyses reveal informal power dynamics, including deference to elders with long-standing involvement or those contributing significantly to labor, such as organizing kitchens. Daily practices and lifestyle norms. Members of the Rainbow family maintain a lifestyle centered on voluntary communal labor, non-monetary exchange, and egalitarian principles, with many participants adopting nomadic or low-impact living patterns between gatherings. Daily routines emphasize sharing resources freely, such as food and labor, without assigned roles or coercion, fostering interdependence through practices like chopping vegetables for group meals or hauling water from streams. Outside of gatherings, adherents often sustain these norms via informal networks of mutual aid, though economic survival may involve bartering or temporary work in Babylon, the term for mainstream society. Dietary norms prioritize vegetarian or vegan meals, prepared in decentralized kitchens that serve communal stews, rice, beans, and bread to hundreds or thousands daily via the dinner circle or food circle, accompanied by chants like Om to invoke unity. Funding for bulk ingredients comes from voluntary donations collected in a Magic Hat passed after meals, yielding $200 $400 nightly, while meat consumption is restricted or absent in core areas to align with non-violence ideals. Alcohol is generally prohibited in main gathering spaces, confined instead to peripheral camp zones, though enforcement relies on peer pressure rather than formal rules. Decision-making permeates daily interactions through consensus processes in talking circles, where participants speak in turn using a focal object like an eagle feather, requiring unanimous agreement without voting or leaders. A single objection can halt proposals, as seen in councils determining food allocations or site cleanups. Social norms include addressing others as brother or sister, frequent hugs, and nonviolent conflict resolution via Shanti-Sena peacekeeping, where volunteers encircle aggressors with linked arms or use de-escalation techniques like verbal affirmations of love. Nightly drum circles and spontaneous singing reinforce community bonds, often inducing trance-like states through repetitive rhythms. These practices extend to hygiene and environmental stewardship, with voluntary latrine digging and water filtration, though adherence varies, leading to occasional lapses in sanitation amid large temporary populations of 10,000 to 30,000. Drug use, particularly marijuana and psychedelics like LSD, is tolerated as spiritually enhancing, contrasting with prohibitions on harder substances or violence, which prompt reintegrative shaming or expulsion for repeat offenders. Overall, the lifestyle rejects hierarchy and consumerism, modeling a decentralized anarchy sustained by ideological commitment to peace and harmony. Gatherings and activities. Annual and regional gatherings. The Rainbow family organizes an annual gathering each summer, traditionally held from July 1st to July 7th in a rotating U.S. national forest, drawing 10,000 to 30,000 participants who camp collectively without formal permits or leaders. Regional gatherings occur multiple times yearly across the U.S. and internationally, typically lasting 5 to 10 days on public or private lands, attracting hundreds to a few thousand attendees focused on local networking and skill sharing. Attendance fluctuates based on scouting success and publicity, with U.S. Forest Service monitoring revealing patterns of unpermitted assembly leading to citations for sanitation violations and fire risks in both annual and regional settings. Structure, rituals, and participant experiences. Rainbow gatherings operate without formal leaders or hierarchy, relying on voluntary participation and consensus-based decision-making in open councils. These councils, held in the main meadow, use focal objects such as an eagle feather to regulate speaking turns, with vibes watchers ensuring respectful proceedings. All attendees may participate, and consensus requires general agreement, often prolonging discussions for hours or days. Rituals reinforce communal bonds and spiritual ideals, including daily dinner circles where participants gather for shared meals prepared in 5 to 10 kitchens, often preceded by Om chanting to harmonize group energy. The annual July 4th ceremony features a silent meditation from dawn to noon for world peace and earth healing, followed by participants forming hand-holding circles, children's parades, and drumming. Other practices encompass drum circles for collective expression, heart songs during councils for emotional sharing to build consensus, and informal ceremonies like weddings or trade circle events, all conducted without monetary exchange in a gift economy. Participants experience gatherings as temporary intentional communities fostering fictive kinship, with greetings like "Welcome home, brother/sister" and "We love you" creating a sense of belonging amid 10,000 to 30,000 attendees. Daily life involves cycling through tasks such as cooking, cleanup, and workshops on topics like yoga or sustainable living, alongside spontaneous activities like drumming, bartering, and informal discussions. Newcomers undergo socialization via elders and norms emphasizing contribution to avoid labels like drainbows for non-workers. Accounts describe spiritual renewal and healing, with one participant likening it to a once-a-year church, though challenges include slow logistics, interpersonal tensions resolved via reintegrative shaming or shanti-sena, and physical demands like hiking to remote sites. Logistical challenges and resource use. The Rainbow family's commitment to non-hierarchical organization and rejection of formal permits complicates logistical planning for gatherings, which often attract 10,000 to 50,000 participants in remote national forest sites without centralized coordination for essentials like water supply, sanitation, and waste disposal. Resource consumption strains public lands, with participants drawing heavily from natural water bodies for drinking and cooking, often without filtration, leading to downstream pollution from soap residues, food waste, and human waste entering streams. Despite ideals of leaving no trace, empirical outcomes reveal inefficiencies, such as incomplete waste removal, with Forest Service reports citing strained relations due to unaddressed impacts like compacted trails and microbial contamination in water sources. Legal and regulatory conflicts. Permit disputes and court cases. The U.S. Forest Service requires special use permits under 36 CFR Section 251.54 for non-commercial group events exceeding 75 participants on national forest lands, aimed at protecting natural resources, reducing sanitation risks, and managing traffic impacts from large assemblies. The Rainbow family has resisted this process since the 1970s, asserting that their leaderless, consensus-based structure prevents designating a responsible signatory, which the application demands, and viewing permits as incompatible with their anti-authoritarian ethos. A landmark early dispute arose ahead of the 1988 national gathering in the Davy Crockett National Forest, Texas, where the government sought a preliminary injunction to enforce a permit or halt preparations. In United States v. Rainbow Family, 695 F. Sup. 294, ed. Tex. 1988, the district court recognized the Rainbow family as a suable unincorporated association under Fed. R. Civ. P. 17b, rejecting claims of non-existence as an entity. Subsequent challenges yielded mixed but predominantly upholding results for the permit regime as a content-neutral time, place, and manner restriction serving substantial government interests. In Black v. Arthur, D. Orr, 1997, participants sued Oregon Forest Service officials over citations for a gathering lacking a permit, but the court dismissed the case, holding the signature requirement constitutional as it applied equally to all groups and ample alternative venues existed. Appellate rulings reinforced enforcement. The Ninth Circuit in 2004, United States v. Rainbow Family, 388 F.3d 708, upheld permit applicability to the 2000 Beaverhead gathering, classifying it as organized despite denials. Interactions with law enforcement. The Rainbow family's refusal to obtain permits for large gatherings on federal lands has routinely prompted heightened law enforcement involvement, including U.S. Forest Service, USFS, officers, local sheriffs, and federal agents conducting traffic stops, checkpoints, and patrols to enforce regulations on camping, sanitation, and controlled substances. In the 2008 Wyoming National Gathering, tensions peaked when USFS officers pursued a suspect into the Children's Village area with weapons drawn, prompting an elderly participant to be handcuffed after demanding de-escalation. Responding Shanti-Sena peacekeepers were fired upon with pepper balls, nearly inciting a riot before officers withdrew. By the 2010s, interactions involved systematic monitoring, with complaints of prolonged detentions, up to an hour, for minor infractions like obscured license plates, coupled with pressure to consent to vehicle searches. Recent enforcement actions, 2020s. In 2022, during the 50th anniversary Rainbow Gathering in Colorado's Root National Forest near Steamboat Springs, U.S. Forest Service law enforcement officers issued 91 enforcement actions by June 27, primarily for violations including illegal camping without permits, drug possession, and motor vehicle infractions. The 2023 gathering in New Hampshire's White Mountain National Forest resulted in approximately 120 violations issued by the U.S. Forest Service, with nearly half involving illegal drug possession, alongside citations for property damage, resisting officers, and unauthorized vehicle use. In June 2024, the U.S. Forest Service ordered hundreds of Rainbow family members at an unsanctioned gathering in California's Plumas National Forest to vacate the site within 48 hours or face fines and potential jail time, citing disruptions to forest resources, illegal occupancy, and failure to secure permits. Early 2025 saw preparations for an unauthorized gathering in Missouri's Mark Twain National Forest, prompting the U.S. Forest Service to increase law enforcement presence in anticipation of up to 5,000 attendees, with violations expected for permit non-compliance, illegal camping, and associated issues like drug use. Controversies and criticisms. Environmental damage and hypocrisy. The Rainbow Family's gatherings, which emphasize ecological harmony and minimal environmental footprint, have frequently resulted in documented damage to public lands, including national forests managed by the U.S. Forest Service, USFS. Common impacts include soil compaction, vegetation trampling, and erosion from large congregations, often numbering in the thousands, concentrated in sensitive wilderness areas without formal permits. For instance, during the 2023 gathering in New Hampshire's White Mountain National Forest, USFS officials reported violations for damage to vegetation alongside other infractions, highlighting resource strain from unregulated use. Human waste disposal poses a particular challenge, with participants relying on slit trenches, shallow, open pits that are intended to be backfilled but often remain exposed or inadequately covered, risking water contamination and pathogen spread. At the 2022 Route National Forest gathering in Colorado, officials cited high volumes of human waste as a top concern, exacerbating wildfire risks and wildlife disruptions in an area already vulnerable to drought. Trash accumulation compounds these issues. Post-event assessments, such as after the 2016 Vermont gathering, revealed lingering debris requiring USFS intervention for site restoration, despite participants' pledges to pack out waste. This pattern underscores a disconnect between the group's professed ideals of earth stewardship, rooted in countercultural rejection of consumerism and advocacy for sustainable living, and the practical outcomes of their nomadic, leaderless assemblies. Critics, including environmental analysts, argue that the Rainbow Family's refusal to secure permits or adopt formalized waste management enables repeated degradation, as seen in historical reports from the 1997 Oregon gathering, where event scale overwhelmed mitigation efforts. While some post-gathering cleanups occur voluntarily, USFS data from multiple sites indicate persistent residual impacts, such as re-exposed trenches and abandoned campsites, contradicting claims of negligible harm. In cases like the 2024 Plumas National Forest incident, unauthorized occupation led to road closures and heightened monitoring to prevent broader ecological fallout, including potential stream pollution from dishwashing and pet waste. Such enforcement reflects systemic frustrations with the group's anti-authoritarian stance, which prioritizes spontaneous assembly over compliance with land use regulations designed to protect ecosystems. Attributed opinions from USFS spokespeople emphasize that while intentions may align with environmentalism, the causal reality of mass, unpermitted convergence generates externalities like biodiversity disruption and restoration costs borne by taxpayers. Drug use, public health, and child welfare issues. Drug use has been a persistent feature of Rainbow Family gatherings, with participants engaging in recreational consumption of substances such as LSD and psychedelic mushrooms, often integrated into the communal and spiritual aspects of the events. Public health challenges at gatherings stem primarily from inadequate sanitation and water treatment in remote, unregulated settings. No formal sanitary facilities are typically provided, leading attendees to rely on improvised latrines and untreated stream water, which heightens risks of waterborne illnesses. Child welfare issues arise from children attending gatherings in environments marked by drug use, nudity, and minimal oversight. Participants have brought children into settings with open drug consumption and related activities, potentially exposing them to substances and unsafe behaviors. No large-scale documented cases of abuse or neglect have been systematically tracked by authorities, but the convergence of these factors raises causal concerns for developmental and health harms under first principles, evaluation of environmental influences on vulnerability. Social dynamics and crime reports. The Rainbow Family operates without formal leadership or hierarchy, relying on consensus-based decision-making and informal norms to maintain order during gatherings. Participants emphasize principles of nonviolence and mutual aid, with the Shanti Sena, a volunteer peacekeeping group, intervening in disputes through mediation or physical restraint, such as duct taping aggressors to trees temporarily to de-escalate violence. Internal conflicts often arise from tensions between the group's idealistic ethos and practical realities, including disputes over drug tolerance, resource allocation, and enforcement of norms like prohibiting alcohol in main areas. Crime reports from gatherings highlight recurrent issues with violence, theft, and drug-related offenses, often concentrated in a camp where formal controls weaken. U.S. Forest Service data from the 2022 Colorado gathering recorded 191 arrests and citations, primarily for drug possession and trespassing, alongside unquantified assaults. Sexual assaults and predation have been documented, with past reports linking gatherings to such crimes amid lax oversight. A 2020 Minnesota case involved a man charged with sexually assaulting a woman at a North Shore gathering, also biting off part of another attendee's finger. Cultural misappropriation and mythical claims. The Rainbow family has been criticized by Native American groups for cultural misappropriation, particularly in adopting and adapting indigenous spiritual practices such as sweat lodges, drum circles, and council meetings without traditional authorization or cultural transmission from recognized tribal elders. These elements, integrated into gatherings as core rituals for purification, visioning, and decision-making, are often facilitated by non-native participants claiming personal revelation rather than lineage-based expertise, leading to accusations of superficial imitation that dilutes authentic traditions. Central to these critiques is the Rainbow movement's reliance on a purported Native American prophecy foretelling warriors of the rainbow who would emerge to restore harmony, a narrative invoked to justify gatherings on public and tribal-adjacent lands as fulfillment of indigenous destiny. This claim traces not to verified oral histories or tribal records, but to the 1962 book Warriors of the Rainbow, Strange and Prophetic Indian Dreams, by non-native authors William Waloya and Vincent Brown, which invented prophetic visions attributed to unnamed Indian sources as part of a modern environmental mythology. Such mythical framing has persisted despite scholarly tracing of rainbow origins to 1960s counterculture influences, including anti-war activism and communal experiments, rather than pre-colonial traditions. Legacy and societal impact. Purported achievements and cultural influence. The Rainbow family of living light purports to exemplify successful large-scale voluntary cooperation without hierarchical structures or economic incentives, as demonstrated by its annual gatherings initiated in 1972 near Granby, Colorado, which drew approximately 20,000 participants. Subsequent national gatherings have consistently attracted 5,000 to 10,000 attendees each year, relying on consensus councils for site selection and operations, such as the three-day Vision Council process in 2009 that resolved location disputes without coercion. Academic analyses attribute this endurance to the group's ideological emphasis on communitas, a transient sense of equality and shared purpose that motivates participants to contribute labor and resources freely, thereby mitigating the freer rider problem inherent in anarchist collectives. Proponents highlight the Shanti Sena peacekeeping system as an achievement in nonviolent conflict resolution, where decentralized volunteers de-escalate disputes through empathy and dialogue, as in a 2009 incident involving an armed intruder resolved peacefully without external intervention. This approach, rooted in the group's founding principles of peace and healing, extends to rituals like the annual July 4th silent meditation for global harmony, which participants describe as generating profound collective energy. Such practices foster a temporary egalitarian community accommodating diverse beliefs, from shamanistic drumming to interfaith camps, positioning the gatherings as experimental models of cooperative society. In terms of cultural influence, the Rainbow family has contributed to sustaining 1960s countercultural ideals into the present, inspiring personal transformations that proponents claim lead to broader activism, such as involvement in environmental organizations like Greenpeace or local community projects. The movement's non-commercial, ad hoc ethos has parallels in later transformative events, serving as an early template for global rainbow gatherings in Europe and beyond since the 1970s, though its societal reach remains confined to niche subcultures rather than mainstream adoption. Critics within anthropological studies note that while these influences promote ideals of freedom and anti-consumerism, empirical evidence of scalable societal change is limited, with impacts primarily anecdotal among repeat attendees. Failures and broader critiques. Despite its aspirations for a non-hierarchical utopia, the Rainbow family's anarchic structure has empirically failed to prevent recurrent internal disruptions, including violent incidents such as a 2015 stabbing at the Utah gathering where a woman was arrested, and unexplained deaths like that of a 39-year-old attendee found outside the camp during the same event. Attendance at national and regional gatherings has declined since the 1990s, with factors including the aging out of founding elders, who feel sidelined by younger attendees' disregard for traditions, and the proliferation of Rainbow's freeloaders who shirk labor while exploiting shared resources, diluting the original spiritual focus with hedonism and panhandling. Broader critiques highlight the movement's philosophical shortcomings, rooted in an optimistic view of human nature that underestimates rational self-interest and free-riding incentives, leading to uneven labor burdens where the poorest perform the hardest tasks while others benefit disproportionately.